Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 6, Episode 10 of Solarpunk Presents, in which Ariel and I discuss kindness and joy in solarpunk fiction and wonder why, in real life, we're not all choosing to wallow in the joy of meaningful acts of kindness to other people. Before we dive into this last episode of Season 6, let me say thank you to everyone who has joined our Patreon, subscribed to our YouTube channel, and liked our videos. We appreciate your support. Now, on to the episode. Choosing to be kind to other people and to be supportive of other people are, major themes in solarpunk fiction and in solarpunk adjacent fiction. I'm thinking of, a bunch of stories where, that's the most important part of the plot, really, is someone being kind. And the
honestly,
person on the receiving end of the kindness learning something from that
yeah. And
about
honestly, that's kind of
themselves
part of the
or
reason why I like solar punk fiction so much because people are just nice to each other in it. I do still avidly enjoy cyberpunk fiction. Don't get me wrong. I grew up reading a whole bunch of cyberpunk fiction. I love cyberpunk fiction, but everybody's such a jerk to each other in them,
yeah,
you know?
there
Like,
are still acts of kindness in cyberpunk
oh
fiction,
yeah,
but
like
they
there are
aren't
still acts
really
of kindness.
transformative. Like they might, someone might save someone else or, whatever because they did the right thing instead of running away and saving themselves. But it doesn't turn out to be psychologically transformative for the person who was the receiver of the act of kindness. Whereas
Yeah,
in
no, and
solar
it's
punk
not
fiction,
like
I think a lot of times the person on the receiving end of a bit of understanding or a bit of kindness that kind of it gives them the possibility to make some sort of breakthrough in
hmm,
in sort of their own relationship with themselves or you know like
yeah.
I'm thinking about in the first issue of Solarpunk magazine there was a story totally by just a really famous person, and I'm totally blanking on her name.
You
Bright,
know what?
not
We'll look it up later and just like put it in here
Bright.
in
We
a
will.
soundbite. And so that will be there
And it
later.
was about a character who had shown up to his prom in a dress,
Mm.
right?
Oh,
And
it's
had
oh shoot. The something dress by Starhawk.
yeah, that famous
The brave
person.
dress. There we go.
Okay, you
I
even
remember.
know the name of the story, right? And
Yes.
this person was so traumatized by everyone's reaction to that and the bullying that they had received. And so they were now living in this, very solar punk kind of commune or whatever it was. And they were having some sort of equivalent to a prom. And this person really wanted their child to wear this
Hmm.
particular dress. And it meant so much to them. And their kid was like, are you crazy? I don't want to wear your dumb dress. But
Right.
then what happened is like everyone saw that it meant so much to this person, and that this was going to help this person heal, and so everybody took a turn wearing this dress. And so this was this
Yeah.
act of kindness that then, allowed the protagonist to come to peace with the past, to make this big breakthrough in something that was this trauma that they've been carrying around with them, right? And this to me is a pivotal act, a typical pivotal act of kindness in solarpunk stories.
Yeah, I think in Solarpunk's stories, like it's not just that people choose to be kind, but that kindness, like the Solarpunk story does actually sort of like meditate on that and how that reverberates throughout. It can be reverberating throughout a community, it can just be reverberating throughout a family, throughout a single person, like but really focusing on the change that act of kindness really, like sparks in someone's psychology or in the way that life works, I guess, I mean, it could be everyone in the story or it could just be the protagonist, whichever. But I know, I don't know. That's part of the delight, I think, of reading a bunch of solar punk fiction for me. And I wanted to
Well,
talk,
and before you move on,
oh,
I mean, and
sorry.
wouldn't it be great to be able to do these kind of acts of kindness in real life? I mean, this is no, I don't want to pick on your mitt rescuing story because that was a nice thing of you to
No,
do, but
that's
it's
fair.
not a transformative act of kindness necessarily. Christina, breaking in to say, the episode was getting a bit long, so I cut out the bit where I asked Ariel about her most recent act of kindness, and she told me about rescuing someone from leaving their mittens behind on the bus when they got off. That's now in the bonus clips for this episode, which you have to join our Patreon to hear, so join our Patreon.
No,
Right?
no.
I mean, this stuff is
It's not like I
so...
changed someone's life. Like,
Although
like
maybe you
I would
did, you know?
never claim to have changed someone's life either.
Maybe
But like
maybe
I feel
someone's
like I
mother had knitted them those mitts before she died. I mean, maybe
well,
this
maybe
was like, you never know. You
yeah.
never know. That's it. You never know how meaningful an act of kindness might end up being to someone. But wouldn't it be great to be the kind of person who can see how meaningful an act of kindness would be to someone? I'd love
Yeah.
to be someone who could do that. I'm not someone who's like that.
No, and I think very few people are because it is very difficult to figure out what's going on with another person unless they are like a member of your family or like your super close
Oh, I think
friend or
it's even
something like that.
harder if it's a member of your family.
Well, I'm just thinking about like if you have shared history, you might
It's so much
know a
harder to
little
cut
bit.
those people slack.
Oh, okay, all right.
Well, that's a whole
But
other issue, but never mind.
okay. All right. Okay. Anyways.
Well,
My
I
point
think,
being that, like in solarpunk fiction, it's really nice because you, the reader, get to explore everybody's sort of like different trajectories and feelings and, like how that sort of act, impacts them. Whereas in real life, it's very difficult to do that, like you kind of have to just sort of hope that and have faith that that is helping someone. You do
yeah,
what you think is going to be best to help someone. And sometimes it turns out that you try to help someone and they do not want your help, or they
or it
feel like
backfires.
like your help is condescending,
Hmm.
or you are helping them, quote unquote, helping them in a way that you think you would like to be helped, but that really doesn't map onto the desires of other people. And so there's always that potential for misunderstanding.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so
that's true.
because you
But
can
I
never
mean,
really
but
know the
be you
life of
don't
another.
to be kind to someone doesn't necessarily mean you have that you're helping them.
Well, yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
it's complicated. It's complicated. I was just
Yeah.
thinking, back in the late 80s, there was this, yeah, it's not a movement. There was this cultural thing, this thing in the
Hmm.
culture, where everyone was like, yeah, let's do random acts of kindness and senseless acts of beauty. And so people would, put this on their bumper sticker, put this bumper sticker on their car, but then they, if they actually did stuff, they would, if someone had a parking meter that had expired, they'd put a couple quarters in or something like that.
Mm.
And then they would just go off and think about how wonderful they were because they were engaging in these random acts of kindness. And that is not what I'm talking about.
I feel like I've seen a bumper sticker about that somewhere. I didn't know it was like a whole cultural movement, though.
Yeah,
That's
movement's a strong. It was a moment, a cultural moment. Maybe it lasted about a year or two, and it was kind of
uh,
trendy.
interesting.
But only the irritating people took part in it.
Now who's being judgy?
Oh, I'm horribly judgy. And don't you know this?
Okay, to get back to the topic, I was going to give an example. It's not from like, like solarpunk fiction per se, but it's from utopian science fiction. And, I'm talking about Ursula K. LeGuin's Ones Who Walk Away from the Omelas, and she's sort of known as like the grandmother of like, solarpunk fiction, right? So I also want to talk a little bit about another short story called The Ones Who Stay and Fight by N.K. Jemisin, which sort of directly speaks to Omelas in a really interesting way. Like both stories started didactically, but what they're describing when they
Right, right,
set
right,
out is
right, wait.
joy.
Stop, stop. I'm a
Oh,
scientist. You got to tell me what didactically means.
oh, didactically just means like teaching a lesson,
Okay.
like the story starts out and the author is speaking sort of directly to the reader, being like, I, like am describing this and I'm describing that, and you probably want to know about this, and you probably want to know about that, and stuff like that. So both stories kind of mimic that narrative style. And so what they're describing is like a joy that's individual and something that's communal because everyone is getting together on the day of a celebration. So both of these stories are about the day, like something happening on the day of the celebration. And then each story goes on to describe the conditions that give rise to that joy and to sort of explain why that joy exists. So,
Yeah, yeah. So I haven't read the Omelas story in a while. I did just recently read The Ones Who Stay and Fight. I have to admit that the beginning with this description of this joy actually really struck me as being kind of creepy. It was, in a, yeah, kind of like there's nothing not quite right with this picture here. Um, but anyways, but before we go on, especially since you have probably more recently read the Ursula K. LeGuin story, maybe you could refresh some of our listeners' memories about what the plot was.
the story is a description of a utopian city that's like it's on the day of a celebration, and it's a description of how happy the people are with a lot of like interjection by the author, talking directly to the reader about the process of like world building a happy city. And like the author doesn't think that the reader's convinced by their description of how happy Omelas is. Like it doesn't seem real. Like Christina, you had that feeling that the joy was creepy. And so I think in this
Oh no,
story,
I
the
was talking about
one
the
kind of
the other story.
yeah, I know,
Oh,
but
okay.
like
But
it's
maybe
sort
she's
of
mimicking. Okay.
yeah, like an idea that like there cannot be joy. It's sort of weird without, there being something dark underneath it.
Okay, but
So
it was more like I felt like it was more like lobotomized.
yeah, like people don't think about it. But Ursula K. Le Guin is very adamant that they do think about it. And she talks about how she illustrates it in this one example of how sort of below the city there's a child who's kept in solitary confinement in what is basically a broom closet. It's not given clothes, it continually begs to be let out, but nobody's allowed to show it even one bit of kindness. And I think the story actually like says, quote, that is the agreement, unquote, or like contract doesn't say who the contract is with, but that all the happiness of Omelas rests on the continued misery of this one child. At a certain age, also, all the citizens of Omelas are taken to go see the child and to understand the condition that their joy rests on and to sort of wrestle with that internally. And some decide that it's just too monstrous to bear and they leave. And the story is titled after the ones who walk away from that situation. The author, LeGuin, says she doesn't know where they go, but they have decided that they can't stand being in Omelas and being sort of complicit in the basically the torture of this child.
What was this story really about? I mean, is this like a commentary on a society that relies on slavery or that has some sort of underclass or
It can be about a bunch of different things, like it can be about all of that. It can be a lesson on world building, on how it is necessary, how some people will not believe a good thing unless there is also a bad thing. It can be a lesson about how every utopia is someone else's dystopia. It can be a story about how there is a moral imperative to, once you know something, to act upon that and to decide not to be part of monstrous system. There's a bunch of different sort of
so she was
meanings.
saying the people who walk away are the right one, are making the right decision.
Yeah, well, I mean, like she never really passes judgment. She just says, this is what happens, and then just leaves it at that. It's all postmodern and open-ended,
Right,
so.
okay. But I want to be told what to think. Actually, no, I don't. But
Yeah, no, you
anyways.
have to decide for yourself. And that's the reason why it has so many meanings, is because it speaks to people where they're at when they read a story. Everybody's going to think of something slightly different to do with sort of their own situation or how they understand the world to work, right?
So this is
So,
interesting. So this is a story about choosing joy that explicitly depends on not choosing kindness.
yeah, well, Amalas is joy that's sort of based on the sacrifice of one single person. So the entire city can revel in bliss from like day to day because all of the negatives are visited on a single child beneath the city. So like they have chosen to experience joy at the expense of this. one child. And so
Is this
it
a
also
commentary on Christianity? On
maybe it
choosing
also
to sin because all of your sins were washed away by the suffering of one person? It sounds, yeah, I
maybe.
don't
I
know.
mean, like, and also it could be a commentary on those people who are like, like they solve the trolley problem by being like, well, if we save a large amount of people, then the suffering of like a small amount of people doesn't matter so much? And then there's the story, and you're like, well, but how can you morally weigh that, right? So it sort
In
of
my,
stands as that.
yeah, I think once yeah, morals, people who sit and think about what the most moral action is, I, I don't ever want to be one of those people. I have extreme distrust for those kind of people for some reason.
Now, don't you talk about philosophy majors like that.
Ah, oh, did I? Sorry, I hate philosophy. I know some people, I have friends who love philosophy, but I absolutely cannot stand philosophy.
Well, Christina, what if I told you that you have your own philosophy? It probably just isn't expressed
Oh,
the
my
same.
little brain would explode. But see, I don't write books about my own personal philosophy. I mean, obviously, if you're writing stories, you're including your vision of the way the world should be, and you're including your moral judgments in there. But I don't sit around and try to make philosophical proofs or anything like
You're
that. Or and
not
I don't try
animating.
to think of, I don't try to philosophize about the ethics of situations.
No,
I hate the
I mean,
trolley problem. I hate the trolley problem. It just makes me angry, you know?
like I said,
Because
there's all kinds of
implicit in the
different
trolley
people.
problem is that thought that that you are the sort of person who will make the most moral decision. And
Yeah, yeah.
and
I mean,
that's
that's the
weird.
inherent
People though,
hubris
because
in the
people
trolley problem.
don't, you know, people just react to these situations. They're not like, okay, now I have to think about which way am I gonna, which way should I switch the track? You're just gonna
It has a
do
lot of
something, right?
implications for how AI self-driving cars decide on how to sort of act in situations like that. But you
Yeah,
know
no, and
what?
that's a debate we should be having, but we shouldn't be having that egotistically.
No, no. I think, you know what? I think that there are people who are trained to think like that, like the philosophy majors, let's say.
Hmm.
And that
Who
is
I'm
what
sure are
they
all very
do.
fine people, even though
Yeah,
even though I
exactly.
hate
But you know
philosophy.
what? They do that, and like I am not qualified to do that kind of thing. And you know what? I am very glad that I'm not stuck in a trolley problem situation right now. If I were, who knows? But I'm not. So it's a moot
Well, I
point.
think we tend to solve these problems emotionally rather than logically and ethically.
Yeah.
We just do what we are gonna do. We just
Yeah.
know what we're gonna do, don't we? Or maybe I'm weird. I don't know.
I I don't know. It's
Yeah, I don't wrestle with moral dilemmas. I just know what is the right answer for me. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I haven't really faced a lot of moral dilemmas.
how
Hmm.
about I get back to talking about solarpunk
Yes, that
fiction?
would be good.
Okay, all right. I'm next going to talk about the
I would
ones
walk
who stay
away,
in
by the
fight.
way.
Pardon me?
I would be one of those people who walked away, by the way.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. We all like to think that, don't we?
I don't yeah.
Okay. So,
I'm not really a
um
party person.
well, I want to talk about the ones who stay and fight now.
Okay, now
And
see, I've made the morally wrong choice. Okay. Hmm.
you look, I'm not here to pass judgment on you, Christina. I am here to explain what this story is about so that our listeners can be on the same page as us, okay?
Except it is time now to stay and fight.
Yes. So N.K. Jemisin wrote The Ones Who Stay and Fight like a few years ago as a direct companion or like speaking back to LeGuin's story. So the city in her story is called Hellet, and it's basically like a future version of our world, whose joy and fairness and equality is achieved by concealing the past in all its corruption and intolerance and hierarchies. So we went from the dystopia that we live in now to a
A
beautiful utopia.
lobotomized future where we're not allowed to have ideas.
Stop passing judgment. So the city has a network of social workers slash enforcers who monitor people who uncover these ideas from the past. And so if the people discovering past oppressions like those oppressions and decide to act on them, the network takes them out. So the story takes us to the scene of one such killing where the dead
And she
young
doesn't
daughter.
mean like trash. She means like murder.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, take them out as in like put a hit on them, like very
Stab
John
them
Wick
through
style.
the heart.
Yes, exactly. Who says solar punk fiction isn't exciting? So anyways, the story is sort of focused on the scene of one such killing where the dead man's young daughter vows revenge against the social workers who note that she's already internalizing ideas of who gets to matter and who doesn't. So her dead father matters, the social workers' lives do not matter because they are merely just things for her to take revenge on. But instead of like killing the daughter, so putting her down, they extend a hand of kindness to her so that she can learn and understand what just happened and like eventually join their ranks as a social worker because she is now sort of aware of the stakes. And so Hellet is sort of joy that's based on the compassion of a group of people. The entire city can experience happiness from day to day because of a network of their fellows who operate sort of like quote unquote underground to ensure that dangerous ideologies like some lives mattering more than others doesn't cause anyone to like actually hurt someone else.
I don't know. This is weird. That we can only be nice if we don't know that we have the option of not being nice. And in some ways, I find this a very dark story.
I read it as like it's not just that the guy who was murdered just knew that oppressions had happened and had the thought that some people matter more than others, but that he was starting to act on it. Like he was starting to like make hierarchies of who got to matter and who didn't, like within his own personal life kind of thing. And that was starting to sort of spread and infect other people. And the social workers were like, okay, we can't just sort of let this happen anymore.
Okay.
That's how I read it.
Hmm.
In my idea, like the parable of Omelas is that you can choose not to be part of a toxic system. So even one that brings joy to a whole society if its foundation is rotten. So you can choose not to enjoy that kind of
It's
joy.
tricky, right? I mean, like, how are you going to buy clothes these days without causing or being part of a system that oppresses and causes so much suffering
Yeah,
to
I mean, like,
people in other parts of the world, for instance?
yeah, choosing not to buy fast fashion
But I
or,
mean, it's
like,
all fast. Even when it's not fast, it's all made in questionable situations at this point.
I mean, not all of it. I don't know about in Germany, but there's a lot of like made in Canada clothing and like slow fashion, like people who like make stuff by
Yeah,
hand.
okay. Yeah. That's
So,
true. That's true.
yeah, or honestly, just like thrifting stuff, buying secondhand or consignment is a great way to just not keep perpetuating the cycle of horrible things. And this is kind of beside the point. But
No, but
um
it is, I mean, it's analogous, right? I mean, another way you can interpret the Omelas story
oh yeah, no,
is,
that's true. That's true.
is as,
Like
what's the word? What's the word for a story that they used to have like in old school books that's supposed to teach you a moral lesson?
didactic,
No, 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 no. And it's not analogy. It's
a
well,
parable.
no, it's not a parable either. And because
I don't know what word you're thinking of. I'm
yeah, neither
sorry.
do I. Anyways, carry on, carry
If you
on.
think about it, like edit it into the episode here,
Okay.
so we can have that closure. The argument I think of Hellet, so the ones who stay and fight, is that like disengaging from a toxic system is not enough. And in fact, it allows the bad stuff to continue happening. Like the ones who walk away from the Omelas, they're choosing themselves not to perpetuate a bad system. But it's not actually helping the child in any way. Like it's just kind of leaving Omelas to just sort of keep being what it is, you know? In the ones who stay and fight, it's sort of arguing that citizens need to actively choose to be better and choose compassionate stewardship in order for joy to be possible, and to value their neighbors enough that they willingly engage sort of head on with some really dark shit. Choosing to engage with horrible things so that other people don't have to experience those horrible things.
Allegory.
Allegory, yes.
That was the type of story I was looking for.
Okay, yes, yes. Allegorical. Yes, these can definitely be read as allegorical. In my view, the ones who stay and fight are the ones who do the difficult work of not falling into the paradox of tolerance. So they don't tolerate people who hurt other people. So they don't tolerate ideology that says that some lives matter more than others, because they see how that leads to like one group of people hurting another group of people. And so, like, Jemisin closes off her story by encouraging readers to similarly choose kindness and compassion towards those who are, quote unquote, infected by these ideas in order to combat the spread of like devaluing human life and to keep the city free of that sort of thinking.
It's a weird connection between kindness and joy also in this story, though.
It's definitely making the argument that like, in order for joy to be possible, this sort of hard decision has to be made. Like in
Except the
Omelas,
people making the hard decision are this select group of babysitters, essentially, uh, who have license to kill. Most people in Umhalat or however you say it, they are just kind of going through their day, not worrying about. They're portrayed in the stories being very simple-minded and clueless.
I can't help but thinking about the fact that that is sort of the social contract that a lot of Western societies have made with, like, say, having a police force that does all this nasty, horrible stuff so that regular citizens don't have to engage with this sort of thing.
Well,
All critiques of the police aside, as an institution, it seems like we have invested them with the same sort of it's a similar mindset as to sort of the way that the social worker task force in Hamlet operates.
to me, when you have a police force and the whole any judicial system and all of that, what you've done is you've not outsourced, but I'm going to use the word outsourced vengeance
Hmm.
to the state so that you no longer have to have tribes fighting tribes, families fighting families, individuals fighting individuals. You can give up the eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth and all of that. And you can have this third party step in to deal with disputes and dispense justice and crime and deal with crimes. And that, when you've got a big civilization, you actually need a force like this. The problem with the police isn't that they exist. The problem with the police is that they don't live up to the ideal that they should be. They should be this sort of neutral, unbiased force whose job it is to deal fairly with people's need for vengeance, basically, and justice.
I mean, that's a very idealized
I mean
idea
that,
of
but
what it,
that is the role they should be playing in society. And so that's very
yeah,
different than the role that the uh what we call them, the enforcers or whatever it is, these people are playing
let's call
in.
them the enforcers, I guess. What I see like this idealized police force works as a sort of like a follow-up force, you know, like the crime happens and then like or the vengeance and stuff like that has to be done. Like something happens and then the
These
police come
people
after
are
them.
more like a
Whereas
crack
these
surgery
people are
team
sort of
dealing with
preventative.
cancer.
Pardon me?
This is more like a crack surgery team rappelling in to cut out a tumor.
Yes. Yeah, they're preventative. They're very sort of precision oriented and preventative. So,
Yeah.
and you know, I feel like it can't really argue about whether or not it's like the right way to be. I don't know.
I just find it weird. and patronizing.
Fair. Like the story doesn't go into like how the citizens of Umhalet sort of feel about the social workers. The one that we are following throughout the story is, like we meet her first when she is part of the celebration and she has this cute little interaction with this guy with the flower and
The ladybug.
or ladybug. He's wearing a piece of art or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, she makes it feel good and he's like, yay. And so like it doesn't seem like she's, like a
She's the
vigilante.
grown up. No, she's the grown up, right? And everybody
Yeah.
else is very childish.
Mm.
And I would not want to live in a society where where there's a group of people running around. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's just
Mm.
weird. It's just weird. I think it's a weird story
Mm.
and a weird society.
Regardless of what you think about the society or not, I think the still stands of like instead of just walking away from a system, actually, like engaging with and dealing with the hurt at its source is perhaps the better thing to do than just saying like, well, I guess I'm moving to Europe now.
I think the lesson I took from this story is that it's okay to kill people who are poisonous to a system,
Mm.
right? It's so
The
like so just a couple days ago, for instance, some sort of crack Ukrainian security team assassinated the head of like chemical weapons segment of the Russian army
oh really?
by blowing up an electric scooter that they had planted at the door to
Ooh,
his like the building that he lived in,
wow.
which they blew up as he walked out. You have been sick. This has been all over the news,
Yeah,
right? And to me, like
I know it.
this is the Halat enforcer people in action. And she says that at some point in the story. I don't remember the exact quote, but she talks about how it's just simply acceptable to eliminate a source of rot,
Mm.
right? And so this is a lesson that I'm taking. It's a very radical lesson from this.
Yeah.
And it's you can feel sympathy for it, as awful as it is, to talk about like it's okay to annihilate the people who cause great suffering and the perpetuation of really, really bad ideas. One would hope our justice system would actually take care of this stuff. Obviously, it doesn't behave in an ideal manner, but
Mm.
like, this is a very, very radical story, and it's very dark.
Yeah.
And the rest of us are happy to ignore the stuff that these kinds of people are doing. And these, the general public in this Halat story, they're actually blissfully unaware of what it takes to maintain their joy. They haven't even made a choice.
I wonder if like there's elections or anything like that for social workers or
Well, it seemed like they were the people, like the little girl. They
yeah.
were going to train her to become a social worker,
Yeah.
right? So you have this society that's split into two classes. People who know what's going on because they've seen the darkness and had it trained out of them, but they
Hmm.
still have enough darkness in them to kill people.
Mm.
And the people who are just clueless and simple and ignorant. I don't
Yeah.
think that's what she was going for. I don't know. I really don't know. I really don't know.
I don't know either. I didn't read it that way, but like that is a definitely one reading I think that you can take from it. And also, I mean, like, who gets to choose what is the rot at the heart of society, right?
Exactly. These people are judge, jury, and executioner, and they're not held
Yep.
accountable, right? So it's a weird system. And I mean,
Yeah.
but again, it's an allegory,
Yeah, it's an
right?
allegory and it's something it's
And she's saying
like
we have to
something for
be
you to read and
willing,
then think about, you
right?
know?
We have to be willing to identify the rot in our society. Sorry, and that's horribly vague, but what she's saying is the forces and people and movements, etc., and so forth, and philosophies that make some people more important than others, or
Hmm.
that make some people value more than others, and that we should be standing up against that, and we should be fighting it. I mean, and that's what she's saying, and that's a
Yeah.
good message.
Yeah, I think that's a good message. I think as especially if it like is read in tandem with like, well, if you don't like a system, then just leave. Like that's not
Yeah,
I
so
feel like that
opting
should
out
be the
isn't good
first,
enough.
yeah, that's the first step towards sort of like, like helping the world, I guess. But like it's really not enough. So,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
it's not enough just not to buy fast fashion, blah blah blah. You have to
Yeah,
somehow
exactly.
take an active step towards changing the system.
Yeah, and that can look like, choosing to buy from people who like handmade clothes. That can look like choosing to support small businesses that are like, selling small secondhand stores, or that can look like writing letters to condemn, like to your politicians about companies in your country that enact these sorts of practices overseas, and trying to get people to pay attention to and censure them. There's a bunch of different ways that
Yeah,
one
and
can.
also talking about it with other people
Yeah.
who are unaware of it and
Yeah.
who maybe don't who are maybe put it out of their minds and don't care because it's just easier to buy the pretty clothes.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyways, I think we've somehow wandered actually quite far away from the joy of being kind.
Yeah, yes, I'm sorry. I wanted to
No,
talk
no, no,
about
no, no. I
joy
didn't mean
and
that.
the ways that, we act so that joy can be possible. And yeah, I sort of on to a different topic here, but
Yeah, anyway, so I think we've wandered a little bit away from the idea that why aren't we all choosing to wallow in the joy of being kind to other people, and instead choosing to wallow in the fun of being outraged by little
I think
mistakes that
these
people make. So let's you know, it's the new year soon. We can all turn over a new leaf. We can
Mhm.
all maybe choose to enjoy cutting other people some slack. You know, I mean, I'm not talking people who are doing horrible things, but people who make little mistakes or say stupid things and maybe try to understand that
Yeah,
we
I think
all
I think
sometimes have
maybe the one
bad
thing
days.
that both these stories illustrate pretty concretely is that it's complicated.
It is,
Choosing to be kind is complicated.
and
And
but it's also interesting to ask what would it take to build up a society that's full of joy? Like right now, our society is very full of loneliness, it's full of hardship, it's
Mhm.
very zero-sum game in its thinking. We're all fighting for a dwindling set of resources because everything else is going to the billionaires. But what if we somehow just said, no, I want to live in a society that's based on joy and kindness and sharing and compassion, and I'm going to enjoy that.
Yeah. And, what do we have to get over in ourselves to sort of like allow ourselves to enjoy that, like to recognize that just because someone has, done a good thing doesn't automatically mean that you are a worse person,
Yeah,
and
because it's
so
not like that. It's totally not like that.
yeah, it's, like and realize that
And
being kind is it can be constituted in these small gestures also, like simply my
well,
example.
giving people the room to be themselves is a
Yeah.
major kindness, right? This is a major, major kindness. So, rather than homophobia or people bashing on trans people, what if because I don't know, because of fear or because maybe it's fun, I don't know. But, what if we chose to actually enjoy the kindness of giving other people the room to be themselves? Right? And
Hmm.
obviously I don't need to be telling this to solar punks because this is a key solar punk idea or philosophy or whatever, giving people the room to be themselves and not forcing them into gender roles or forcing them into.
I think so. I mean, like, I think it's a key solar punk idea, but it's also something that I think isn't put into practice very often. And so, it can look very different. And so some people might have the lowly worm moment that you had.
Christina breaking in to say what Ariel is referring to here is also a bit that ended up in the bonus clips because the episode was getting too long, which I was talking about an epiphany I had when talking to someone, and I was talking about how I was being treated like a lowly worm, and I was like, oh my god, the holy worm, lowly worm. It's not just a name. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about.
Like, and realize, oh, hey, this is what it means to give someone the space to be themselves. It means that, like, I, stay in my lane, or
And maybe I also have the space to be myself.
yeah, exactly. And
Right?
and
I mean that
because
it goes both ways, right?
yeah, like because they can be themselves, then I can be myself and feel accepted.
Yeah, and it's all right, and I can be proud of what I am, even though it's not like what everybody else is like. And it's
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
It's okay because it's nice to live in a world where people aren't all the same. That kind of
Yes.
stuff, right? So we should all be wallowing in this kind of joy. And again, I don't feel like we need to really be telling solar punks this, but you know what? If we work on spreading this, because right now the world is kind of closing down and people have turned to fear and they have turned to bullying and they have because they're all hurt or I don't know why. And we really have to double down on our kindness and understanding of other people. And I'm not saying tolerance of meanness. That's not what I'm saying. But
Yeah, and I don't think it looks like, going out and like being like, I am going to make friends with these total
yeah,
strangers.
no, no, there's
Like
no.
it might look like that. But I think in the main, it can look like, strengthening the relationships that you already have. Just like
Yeah,
working on those first,
or even in
before.
just your interactions with people that you run into, you
Yeah.
know? So extending people a bit of grace. Let's
Yeah.
enjoy that. Like in 2025, let's enjoy extending people a bit of grace in reasonable circumstances. Again, you all have brains. I'm not like issuing a blanket statement here. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to try to do, whether I succeed or not.
Yeah. That sounds really nice. It sounds honestly a lot more relaxing.
We'll see. I don't always extend people grace. I have to start by extending grace to my mother-in-law over Christmas vacation, so we'll see if I succeed. See if it
Uh,
lasts longer than an hour. Christina breaking in to say that I succeeded over Christmas. I did not have harsh words for my mother in law, not even once, not even after she was really, really rude to me. Go me.
yeah. Yeah. And extending grace to yourself too, like you're gonna screw up and do bad things, and that's
I'm going to
okay.
screw
You're
up and say
human.
bad things, that's for sure.
I mean, as long as you say you're sorry afterwards,
Oh, do I
you know,
have
like
to? Do I
like
have
like
to?
take responsibility for your own actions.
I'm sorry you pushed my buttons and I yelled at you. That's not really what you mean, though, is it?
No, that is graceless. Um,
I think
uh,
we have to wrap up now.
okay. All right. Well, I think this was a good discussion. I don't know. It's hard to talk about wallowing in joy and choosing to be kind. We don't have a lot of vocabulary for that. And so I think that while we sort of stumbled through this, I mean, hopefully we're making inroads so that other people, maybe people who are listening to this, can have these sorts of conversations with people that they are close to, and think about, like, what does it actually look like to wallow in joy and be kind? And you know what? Maybe they disagree with a whole lot of stuff that we're saying, and that's fine. Like just putting it out there, I think, is what's important. I mean, it's like Omelas and Hallett. You put those stories out there, regardless, like there's not a single meaning, but it's what people can sort of take from it. And it just makes that conversation a little bit easier.
I think it's just making people aware that there is an option Especially on social media, or when you're having an argument with someone, or when you're driving your car or your bike or whatever in traffic, and other people are, maybe not behaving at their best, and that you have the option to bully them, you have the option to yell at them, you have the option to pile on, do a social media pile on, but you also have the option kind of stepping back, thinking maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they didn't mean what they said. Maybe they don't understand what they're saying. And I'm going to give them a little bit of grace. I'm going to smile at them, or I'm gonna, maybe see if there's actually something I could do that would support them, because
Instead
clearly
of
they're
making
having
their day worse.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing I'm talking. And then afterwards to think like, okay, that was okay, and I can, rather than feeling bad because I just said something crappy to someone, I can actually feel kind of good because I did the right thing. Not that doesn't mean I'm super and I'm great and I'm wonderful, or that I'm going to go to heaven or anything like that. It just means it's okay. I can actually enjoy that little, whatever that is, the oxytocin hit or whatever it is you
Yeah,
get
yeah.
from that.
Yeah, and it makes it easier to do the next time too. And the next time and the time after that.
Oh, we'll find out.
You know, get better by practice. All right, gonna call it here. Happy
Yeah.
solstice, Solarpunks, and I hope you have a very happy new year and that is full of kindness and joy.
Yeah, and not the end of democracy in the Western world.
Oh, Christina. No, we're not ending on that note.
Sometimes you
No.
you got to stay and fight. Be kind, but fight for democracy.
Happy New Year.
And that's a wrap for season 6. Thanks for listening. And as Ariel says, have a happy new year. Thank you for listening to Solarpunk Presents, a podcast hosted and produced by Ariel Kroon and Christina De La Rocha.
The audio for this episode was recorded in part on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe peoples.
And in Germany. The opening and closing music for this podcast is Water Cooler Gang by Monkey Warhol, available for use under the Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International License.
Don't forget to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/solarpunkpresents.
Every little bit helps us keep bringing you discussions and interviews.
Until the next episode, keep dreaming.
And stay solarpunk.